Good afternoon, producer Susan. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jersee Joe. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Is it summer in Pennsylvania yet?
The weather is actually quite lovely. There's no humidity.
Have you had your AC on yet this summer?
No, I'm holding off.
You're holding off. I had to break down. It got to be 88 here 2 weeks ago. So I broke down and had to turn on for a day. I couldn't sleep. So, all right. Hey, I know you had sent me a whole bunch of stuff and I appreciate it. And we will get to it. But just I have so much to do, so much to talk about. I won't be able to get to it today. And also this week, we have so much to talk about. I'm just going to be quickly mentioning a few things. And if you find them of interest and want to learn more, just Google them or producer Susan can put some links up, but I'm just going to mention some things quickly. If you want to learn more, just Google the topic. You'll see all the headlines pop up. All right. So here's the things I think I can fit in. I think this is cross my fingers. Remember who our quote of the day was from, or quote of the week was last week?
Was it physicist
John Feynman.
Feynman?
Great memory. Well, guess who our quote of the week is from this week?
A different physicist.
The same physicist, John Feynman again. His quote last week is that education isn't free. You have to pay. Knowledge isn't free. You have to pay attention. Well, I got another quote from physicist John Feynman. With Memorial Day fast approaching in 2 weeks, producer Susan, I understand you have some history and background on the origins of Memorial Day that you're going to share with us. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this is somewhat debated by a couple of different towns, but
Oh, but don't tell us yet. I just want to make sure that
okay,
we're all teed up to go. All right. We'll tell you how much if you invested $100 in a company in the by the name of Berkshire Hathaway in 1965, which is probably before you were born, how much that $100 would be worth today. In our stupidest thing of the week, we actually have three contenders, two involving people who claim they were injured by the fast food they ordered. And the third is how the head of the ATF responded to a question about guns. And for those who don't recognize ATF, that stands for alcohol, tobacco, and the F stands for
firearms.
Firearms. He was asked a very simple question about guns, and we'll play how he responded. You can pick the winner. I know we've talked about this in the past. In our Health Minute, we'll revisit why it's important to make sure you're getting adequate amounts of vitamin D and why it's so vital to your health. In our science segment, we have two stories. One is about the Starlink satellite communications network. Have you ever heard of that one?
I've heard of it.
That's something that Elon Musk has been doing with his SpaceX company, where he's been launching these communication satellites that can provide internet and cell phone service to every part of the world. And we'll give you an update how far along he's got. And the second, I'm going to play a 4-minute audio clip about the finding of a team of researchers who have been drilling and testing ice core samples from the Greenland ice core sheet, which, by the way, Greenland at one time was green, is now covered in ice. And the ice core sheet in Greenland goes down to 3 kilometers, which is roughly 1.8 miles. And it's astounding some of the things they're finding about the temperature of the Earth as far back as 8,000 years ago. And I'll play that 4-minute clip. Did you hear anything about the congressional hearings last week of what the congressional committee investigating Hunter Biden found with regard to how much money was flowing back and forth between Hunter Biden, Chinese, and Romanian sources?
I heard they were happening, but I wasn't paying attention to the details.
Well, if you didn't hear a lot, don't worry about the mainstream media decided it wasn't important for the American people to hear most of that testimony. And finally, if we can fit it in, our taxpayer relief shot is from Philadelphia, where a man shoots and kills another man who's trying to rob him at gunpoint. Philadelphia, I'm shocked. One of the highest murder rates in the entire country. All right, think we can fit that in?
I'm sure you'll do a good job.
All right. Our quote of the day, again from physicist Richard Feynman, who said, "Never confuse education with intelligence. You can have a PhD and still be an idiot." And I can speak from experience. I have known PhDs. I've known guys with MBAs. I know other people who are members of Mensa and are completely devoid of any common sense. Producer Susan, from your own experience, you know any people with advanced degrees who are complete idiots?
Oh, absolutely.
So,
No common sense.
I'm sorry?
No common sense.
No common sense whatsoever. They can be complete idiots. So I think most people would have to agree if they just stop and think from it. Do they know any people with MBAs, PhDs? And again, I know, and it's not just one or two. I get into some, as part of Mensa, we have these kind of chat boards, and I'm just amazed at the idiocy of some of the people, in Mensa when it comes to logic and common sense. Anyway, so with Memorial Day coming up, and what is it? 2 weeks from Monday.
Yes.
Understand you have some background on the origins of Memorial Day. You want to share that with us?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different towns who fight over who founded Memorial Day, but one of the three towns is my neighboring town of Boalsburg, Pennsylvania. There were three women, and the reason why I remember the names of these three women is because their names are throughout our town. Different streets are named after them. But it was Emma Hunter, Sophie Keller, and Elizabeth Myers. They would go around and decorate the graves of the soldiers who fought in the Civil War. And that was the foundation for Memorial Day. And Memorial Day is a huge event. It's a weekend long thing that happens here. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It's just a grand celebration, remembrance, and yeah, so we claim to be the founders of Memorial Day in Boalsburg, Pennsylvania.
Well, that's fantastic. I bet you nobody else listening to this podcast knew that. So that's, we say it's the situation, news and perspective you may not have heard, and now I guarantee you nobody else listening to this podcast knew that unless they happen to be a resident of Pennsylvania. All right. So let's go on. So you ever heard of a company called Berkshire Hathaway?
I feel like the name's somewhat familiar.
How about the name Warren Buffett?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, Warren Buffett is the head of Berkshire Hathaway. Berkshire Hathaway is a conglomerate that owns 73 companies, and you may recognize a few of these companies. Ever heard of Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroads, BNSF?
Yep.
Geico Insurance?
Yep.
Benjamin Moore Paints?
Yep.
Dairy Queen?
Of course, your favorite.
Johns Mansville Insulation Products?
Yep.
Duracell Batteries?
Yep.
See's Candies?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hellsberg Diamonds?
Mm-hmm.
Benbridge Jewelers?
Mm-hmm.
Fruit of the Loom Underwear?
Yep.
Plus 6 electric utility companies and more than 60 others for a total of 73 wholly owned subsidiaries, plus large holdings in other companies like Apple and Amazon. So in 1965, if you were to deposit $100, let me put this in perspective. In 1965, $100 was probably 2 or 3 days worth of pay. But if you invested $100 in Berkshire Hathaway stock in 1965, which was, let's see, that's 35 and 23, 47 years ago?
57 years ago.
57. What do you think that
50
$100 would be worth today?
Several thousand.
Try $2.5 million.
Wow.
$2.5 million. $100 in 1965 would be worth $2.5 million if you'd bought $100 worth of Berkshire Hathaway stock back then when he first started Berkshire Hathaway. Isn't that just incredible?
Yeah.
And a lot of people like you have not, I may have heard the name, but they don't realize how many Geico Insurance, you see their commercials on TV. If you ever stop the railroad crossing, you'll see BNSF trains go by, Benjamin Moore Paints, Dairy Queen. Incredibly, one of the most successful investment companies in the entire world, not just the United States. So $100 became $2.5 million in 57 years. Anyway, ready to move on to the stupidest things I've heard all week?
Oh, I know. I sent you a couple.
You sent me a couple. So this is going to have to be listener's choice. You can get the first vote. But the first is a jury verdict out of Florida where a couple sued a local McDonald's franchise because their child, they ordered some chicken McNuggets and the kid put the chicken McNugget in his mouth and burned his mouth. And they claimed the restaurant was negligent in not providing a proper warning about the potential risks of being burned by quickly eating hot food. Now, it was a civil trial, so they didn't need a unanimous verdict, but it was like a 4-2. Of course, you know what this is going to lead to, right? There's going to be all sorts of new warnings on a bag of chicken McNuggets.
I believe it was the child's thigh.
Or the thigh?
I think it fell on their car seat and burned their thigh.
Okay, so but still, so now we're going to have warnings on chicken McNuggets. Now, the
Mhm.
second is a story out of New Jersey where a couple in their 40s, and I'm going to tell you why 40s is important. They pulled up to a McDonald's drive-through. They ordered some donuts and a couple of cups of hot tea, and they're suing the franchise because these little cardboard carriers that you stick the cups in and stuff. Well, after they got their stuff and they drove away, the woman tried to open the tea and it spilled in her lap, burning her legs, which she claimed she had to seek treatment for. So not only is she seeking damages for her burns, her husband is seeking treatment, claiming loss of consortium. He's actually claiming loss of his wife's companionship and services resulting from the burns, meaning they couldn't have sex for a week while she's recovering from her burns. So that's our second entry into this week's stupidest thing. Now, the last one I want to play, this is a really short clip. So this is the head of the ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms is key. And he's asked by a congressman during this congressional hearing, can you tell us what an assault weapon is? Because they're talking about various assault weapon bans. So here comes the clip.
Veteran. I have some expertise in weaponry and self-defense weapons. What could you, in 15 seconds, would you define an assault weapon for me?
So
If you go at that 15 seconds, I'll just interrupt you.
so I'll go shorter than that because I honestly, I do think if Congress wishes to take that up, I think Congress would have to do the work. We would be there to provide technical assistance. Unlike you, I'm not a firearms expert.
I'm not a firearms expert. Well, if you're not a firearms expert, then what are you doing heading up the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms? So, producer Susan, between those three, the chicken McNugget, the hot tea, or the head of the ATF who says he's not a firearms expert?
I'm going to go with the Dunkin' Donuts because, the 40-year-old should know better. The child, may not know that chicken McNuggets are hot, although their parents should have known.
Right. And if you were in the jury and the husband is claiming loss of his wife's services because of the burns on her legs, how much would you award him? Now, remember, they're in their mid to late 40s.
Nothing. He should be a supportive husband through sickness and health.
That's right. All right. So you're going to go with the hot tea being all right. I would like to hear from the listeners. If anybody wants to email me, just remember it's joe@jerzee-joe.com and let me know who you're going to vote for. All right. Let's talk about health and vitamin D. Now, I think 4 or 5 months ago, maybe 6 months ago, we talked about how important vitamin D levels were to preventing you from getting COVID or getting COVID seriously. You remember? I don't know if you remember that podcast.
Yep.
Well, a study came out this week. Are you familiar with the term long COVID?
Yes.
So what's long COVID?
People who have had COVID and are suffering long-term symptoms,
Right.
lingering symptoms.
Right. 6 months, 12 months, 14 months, where they still have these lingering symptoms. Well, this research group did a study of people who were suffering from long COVID, and they found that more than 90% of them had a vitamin D deficiency. And by the way, do you know what percentage of the U.S. population is in fact vitamin D deficient?
I'm going to say there's probably quite a few.
Try almost half of the U.S. population is
Yeah,
vitamin D
I
deficient.
believe it.
And it gets worse in the wintertime because you do get vitamin C from sunshine, but it varies seasonally, but in the wintertime, more than half the population is vitamin D deficient. Now, aside from sunshine, do you know where you get vitamin D?
Some foods, leafy green foods like broccoli and spinach.
Well, and more specifically, oily fish like tuna and salmon,
Mhm.
orange juice, egg yolks, but most importantly of all, take a daily vitamin that has 100% of vitamin D. Again, it will help prevent getting diseases, not just COVID, but diseases like COVID. And if you do come down with COVID, if at all, it will most likely make it a very mild case and you won't wind up suffering from lingering symptoms for half a year or more from COVID. So again, half the people in this country are vitamin D deficient. So if you're not taking a multivitamin, you don't drink orange juice every day, please take a multivitamin. Do you take a vitamin?
I do take a multivitamin and a vitamin D with calcium, and I have to knock on wood here because I feel like when I say this, I'm jinxing myself. I feel like I'm one of the last people that has not had COVID.
Well, it could very well. I think that probably your vitamin D level has probably played some element in, you may have even had it and not known it. A lot of
No,
people
I
get,
actually do know because I do donate blood regularly every 56 days. And as part of that, if we've had COVID, they would rather us donate plasma. So I do know that, at least based on blood tests, I've not ever had COVID.
well, good for you. Fantastic. All right. So let's talk about Starlink. Starlink is this is a project, people said Elon Musk, why did he spend, billions of dollars to create this rocket ship company, SpaceX? Well, Elon Musk is crazy like a fox. His end game, and which is now coming to fruition. Now, for the first 3 or 4 years, SpaceX was a money pit. I mean, you don't decide to say, I'm going to build a company, I'm going to create a company that's going to design, build, and launch rocket ships and expect to be making money in the first 18 months, right?
Yep.
So they didn't even launch their first prototype for 36 months. But starting about a year and a half ago, they began to communicate. By the way, and SpaceX now launches satellites for a whole bunch of different people. They launch them for the military, they launch them for private communication companies, they launch them for the National Weather Service. But he's also been launching his own communication satellites. They're called Starlink. They're about the size of a beach ball. And he's launching them into low Earth orbit, and they provide internet and cell phone service. Now, you need a Starlink terminal. And during the Ukraine war, he was actually providing and has continued to provide Starlink terminals to the Ukrainian military so they can communicate securely, via internet and cell phone, routing their communications through the Starlink terminals, which are not the same as a cell tower, because a lot of the cell towers and the power to the cell towers were destroyed. So you want to guess how many Starlink beach ball sized satellites there are orbiting the Earth right now as we speak?
100.
Try 3,700. 3,700. Right now, there is not 1 square inch of the Earth that cannot be accessed by a Starlink satellite. A single Falcon 9 rocket, which is the rocket they designed and developed, can carry and place into orbit more than 50 new ones with every single launch. So he launches one rocket and he puts 50 new satellites in orbit. Isn't that stunning? 3,700. And again, each one has a very small footprint. But if you look at the map, there's a website, Facebook site called Science and Technology, and maybe we can get this up on the website. Where you look at this graphic that's showing the coverage these satellites have. It's truly amazing. And I think this is one of the best kept secrets. Until I read it, I had no idea that there were more than 3,000 communication satellites orbiting the Earth. Did you?
No, I had no idea.
So that was truly stunning. All right, how are we doing on time?
You got about 15 minutes.
Good. All right, so we got time for this. Now, I'm going to do a little preamble. This is a 4-minute clip of a scientific mission to Greenland, which and the reason it got its name Greenland, when the Vikings first discovered Greenland, it was in fact green. Now, today, 800 years later, it's covered in ice. And when you hear this gentleman talk about, they're taking ice core samples and they're taking temperature readings from 2 miles down. What was the temperature, with 8,000 years ago? And he's talking about degrees. He'll say 2.5 degrees. Well, every degree he talks about is a Celsius degree. Remember what the ratio between a Celsius degree and a Fahrenheit degree is?
9 to 5 or 5 to 9.
It's almost 2 to 1. So
yeah.
1 Celsius degree is 1.8 Fahrenheit degree. So when he says 4.5 degrees, when he says 2.5 degrees Celsius, it's actually 4.5 degrees Fahrenheit. And here's a little trick he points out. It's all about what your reference point is. When people who are climate alarmists, and by the way, and as he proves, the climate has been continually changing, but he's saying what they're basing their their claims on about global warming is that they've cherry picked the reference point, the starting point. Now, if I say to you, producer Susan, do you know 1 year ago, this time on May the 17th, do you know that it was 12 degrees cooler, so therefore we've had a 12 degrees rise in Earth's temperature?
Yeah.
That would be nonsense, right? Because on I've cherry picked the starting point, right?
Mhm.
Well, and what he points out is that all of these claims about catastrophic global warming are based on the people who make these claims have gone out of their way to pick the absolute lowest average temperature of the Earth in the past 8,000 years. Is that if you pick any other temperature except the one point they picked, none of their claims make any sense. So I'm going to play this clip right now, and please listen carefully, and hopefully, producer Susan, you can get this up on the website. All right, here we go.
From the Viking Age, around year 1000, also called the medieval warm.
I'm going to back it up for you.
This ice is from the Viking Age, around year 1000, also called the medieval warm period. We believe that in Greenland, the medieval warm period was about 1.5 degrees warmer on average than today.
Nordgrip, the Greenland ice core project, is being reopened to drill the last few meters through the ice sheet to the rock beneath the research station. The ice core, over 3 kilometers in length, has been hauled up to the surface piece by piece and contains important data on the history of the climate of the Earth. It bears the fingerprints of climatic conditions over more than 120,000 years.
When we remove or drill the ice core, we leave a hole and we insert a thermometer in the hole. We are able to map out the temperature through the 3-kilometer ice sheet. Now that temperature, if we do it precisely enough, thousandths of a degree accuracy, then the ice has not forgotten how cold or warm it was on the surface at the time the snow fell. So using those temperatures, we have been able to reconstruct the temperatures of the last 10,000. Here we have our picture of the temperature reconstructions that we have from Greenland in a graphical form. And if we go back along this axis, it's going back in time. This is the last 8,000 years we have plotted here. On this axis, we have the temperatures at the sites in Greenland, and we can see that if we go back from now about 4,000 years ago, we would have temperatures up here for about 4,000 years that were 2.5 degrees warmer on average.
2.5 Celsius.
So approach our time, we can see that in the period between 4,000 years ago and back to the period 2,000 years ago, which is actually the Roman age, the temperatures have been decreasing in Greenland by 2.5 degrees. Then the temperatures increased gradually up to a maximum point around the medieval warm period. We call it 1,000 years.
So by the way, I want to, very important. So he goes back 2,000 years to the Roman Empire, and the Earth's temperature took a huge dip. And then 1,000 years later, it took this steep climb. It increased by almost 1.5 degrees Celsius in 1,000 years. And that's called the medieval warming period. And then just as quickly as it rose, it fell sharply again. And now he's going to talk about the sharp, and this fall, this decline, this rapid decline from the medieval warming period. The bottom of this second dip is where everybody starts their uses as a reference point. So here we go. I'm going to back it up just a tiny bit.
The temperatures have been decreasing in Greenland by 2.5 degrees. Then temperatures increased gradually up to a maximum point around the medieval warm period. We call it 1,000 years ago. And then temperatures declined and goes down to a minimum around 1650 AD, comes back up a little in the 18th century, and then around 1875, we have the lowest point in the last.
So 1875, the lowest point in the past 8,000 years, 1875, which was, 150 years ago? Did I
Yeah,
get that right?
150 years.
Right. So that's the point where all the climate alarmists are picking as their starting point, 150 years ago. By the way, the medieval warming period was far warmer then, way warmer then than it is today.
Mhm.
But they're using that point, 1875, as the starting point for all of their hysterical predictions. So here we go.
8,000 years, right here, and that matches exactly the time when meteorological observations started.
Other core samples from elsewhere in Greenland confirm that the Little Ice Age ended about 140 years ago, at the coldest point in the last 10,000 years. The natural, pronounced alteration of warm and cold periods back in time has also been confirmed elsewhere in the Northern Hemisphere. Carbon-14 dating of organic matter from peat bogs and tree rings confirms the pattern. So do data from stalactite caves in China and measurements from North Africa.
The problem is that and I agree completely that we have had a global temperature increase in the 20th century. Yes, but an increase from what? Probably an increase from the lowest point we've had for the last 10,000 years. And this means that it will be very hard indeed to prove whether the increase of temperature in the 20th century was man-made or it's a natural variation. That will be very hard because we made ourselves an extremely poor experiment. We started to observe meteorology at the coldest spot in the last 10,000 years.
Well, producer Susan, any reaction to what you just heard?
Yeah, no, it's so when you listen to the evening news on the weather forecast, the average high and the average low, that is the average of the last 100 years. So May 1923 to May 2023. But when you look at the Earth from the history of when it was created billions of years ago, we are coming out of an ice age.
That's correct. Absolutely correct. And as he points out, the medieval warming period, which was only 1,000 years ago, was way, way warmer than it is today, and way warmer than any of the catastrophic predictions. You hear these things, we need to stop the Earth temperature by raising 1.5 degrees in the next 100 years. Well, the medieval warming period was already way warmer than this doomsday 1.5 degree increase that they're predicting is going to bring about a calamity by the year 2100. So the Earth survived just fine when it happened in the 1400s, and I think if it did occur, which it very well could occur, if everybody survived the medieval warming period, why wouldn't they survive the next one? So, all right, let's see how much we have. Anything else? Oh, the Hunter Biden. So the House committee has been doing an investigation on the flow of money from Chinese and Romanian sources to Hunter Biden and his associates. And they held a press conference which got virtually no coverage by the mainstream media. And here's some of the things they revealed in the press conference, which were stunning. I didn't know these things. They said during the time that Joe Biden was vice president, Hunter Biden and his associates created 16 LLCs. You know what an LLC is?
Limited liability corporation.
LLC is limited, it's a corporation. Now, here's a couple of things that were unique about these 16 LLCs. None of them produced any products or services. None of them had any employees. They had no invoices. They had no accounts payable. Their sole function was to disguise and facilitate the transfer of funds from Chinese and Romanian sources to Hunter Biden and other various Biden family members. Now, but by the way, you know what a suspicious transaction report is?
Any transaction over $10,000.
Right. So, if you walk into a bank and say, I want to withdraw $12,000 in cash, or you walk in the bank and say, I want to deposit $15,000 in $100 bills, or you wire transfer. Anyway, during the time Vice President Biden was vice president, the banks reported to the U.S. Treasury Department filed 176 suspicious transaction reports with regard to wire transfers going in and out of these LLCs that had no customers, no employees, no services. Do you know what happened to those 176 suspicious transaction reports.
I'm gonna guess nothing happened to them.
Nothing. The DOJ took no action. And here's what else the committee noted. They noted what they refer to as the velocity of the transaction. What they meant by velocity is that $1 million would come into one of these LLCs on one day, and within 24 hours, that same $1 million would be wire transferred back out. In other words, that money would stay in that LLC for less than 24 hours. That's what they
Sounds like
mean.
money laundering to me.
That's exactly what it sounds like. And by the way, do you know who are the members of the Biden family that were recipients of Biden? And we're talking $10 million in funds from foreign nationals that went through these 16 LLCs. And here's a list of some of the people who received wire transfers from these 6 LLCs. Of course, we know Hunter Biden, Hallie Biden, who was Beau Biden's, who was the widow of Biden's other son, Beau, who for a while Hunter Biden was dating, Hunter Biden's one-time girlfriend, Hunter Biden's ex-wife, Kathleen Buell, Hunter Biden's current wife, Melissa Cohen, Biden's brother, James, and his brother's wife, Sarah, and, quote, the grandchildren, nieces, and nephews of Joe Biden. Does that sound just a little bit suspicious?
Just a little bit.
Do you think Biden's grandkids, nieces, and nephews were providing any services to those LLC corporations?
I'm thinking that they're all under the age of 18.
You're thinking right. And here's something else. Now, typically, when you get a disbursement, I've done some consulting work. Whenever I do work for a corporation, at the end of the year, you know what I get from that corporation?
1099?
I get a 1099. You know who else gets a copy of that 1099?
The U.S. government.
The IRS. Because
IRS.
there's a record, because the corporation says, hey, we gave Jerzee Joe, we paid Jerzee Joe, $7,420, and the IRS gets a copy of that. And when I file my taxes, I have to include the amount on that 1099. And if I don't, by the way, the IRS will, with a computer, cross-check my return. And if they don't see that money being reported, I'll get an audit notice from the IRS. You think Biden's nieces, nephews, and grandkids got 1099s from those LLCs?
Doubtful, because they're probably not old enough to even file taxes.
So it's going to be interesting where this thing shakes out. But it's really sad that the network news didn't think what I just told you was newsworthy. Anyway, if you want to learn more, I'll put a link up. But if you want to learn more, just look congressional hearing, Hunter Biden money transfers. Just Google Hunter Biden money transfers congressional hearing. The hearing itself is about 45 minutes long. You can listen to it while you're doing something else. All right, we got time for a taxpayer relief shot?
You got 5 minutes.
All right. Well, taxpayer relief shots, when a good guy, or we call them that because when a good guy or a good woman with a gun shoots and kills the thug, we save the taxpayers the cost of a jury trial and putting the guy in jail. And here's how the sheriff of Santa Rosa County, Florida feels about those things. Here we go.
Somebody's breaking in your house, you're more than welcome to shoot them in Santa Rosa County. We prefer that you do, actually. Hopefully you'll save the taxpayers money.
And Sheriff Grady Judge, it takes it a little bit further. He's from Polk County, Florida.
I would highly suggest that if a looter breaks into your home, comes into your home while you're there to steal stuff, that you take your gun and you shoot him. You shoot him so that he looks like grated cheese.
So it's not just me saying this stuff. There you've got 2 different sheriffs saying shoot the bad guys. Anyway, guy on the street in Philadelphia, some guy, by the way, his girlfriend's in the car. So this car pulls up, guy jumps out with a gun and tries to rob this guy at gunpoint. Unfortunately for the robber, the guy he tried to rob has a concealed carry permit. And here's what happens.
Philadelphia police are investigating after a man shot and killed a would-be robber. Investigators say the man in his 30s was shot 3 times in the back by the man he was allegedly trying to rob. Police are still searching for a woman they believe is connected to this shooting. Action News reporter Catherine Scott has the latest now from West Oak Lane.
The man who fired his gun remained here on the scene. He has a permit to carry and told police he was being robbed when he opened fire. An alleged attempted robber shot and killed in West Oak Lane around 6:45 last night.
So it appears this may have been a robbery And the victim of the robbery pulled his own weapon and fired shots, striking the perpetrator.
Philadelphia police say a 25-year-old man had been walking on North 15th Street by 70th Avenue when he was approached by another man who had a gun and tried to rob him. That's when the 25-year-old man pulled out his own gun and fired at least 10 shots at the alleged attempted robber, who was hit 3 times.
The streets was blocked off and all the cops, and I was just wondering what happened.
The alleged attempted robber was taken to the hospital and pronounced dead. The man who fired the gun was taken to police headquarters to speak with detectives.
That's what it's come to. If you have a legal weapon and somebody is trying to rob you, like, what are you supposed to do? You're not supposed to sit there and let somebody kill you.
The alleged robbery victim also told police the man he shot had gotten out of a parked car that had a woman inside. The Ford sedan was found a few blocks away with bullet holes on the driver's side.
We believe the female that was with the male who was shot after the shooting drove that vehicle to 67th Avenue and 17th Street. And that's where we found it, parked unattended with multiple bullet holes.
Police are still looking for her. They're also reviewing surveillance footage in the area. In West Oak Lane, Catherine Scott, Channel 6 Action News.
So what do you think of that
Another
one?
news, Philadelphia.
Yep, sounds justifiable to me.
Right, and he wasn't
Self-defense.
DRT. He wasn't DRT, he was DOI. And by the way, well, they said he shot him in the back. Well, here's how the law works. As long as that guy still had a gun in his hand, you are still in reasonable fear of your life or safety, because he could have whirled around. He was trying to get in the car. He could have whirled around in a half a second and fired his gun at you. So as long as he had that gun in his hand. Now, if he'd been running down the street, then you could maybe make an argument that he was no longer in fear of death or serious bodily injury. But the guy was right there with a gun in his hand 3 feet away. So the fact that he had his back to the guy doesn't make any difference, and the police did not arrest him. Anyway, any comments before we wrap up?
No, so today is the primary day in Pennsylvania. I know New Jersey is coming up, and I know that these non-presidential elections are not very glamorous, but these are the elections where you're voting for your judges and your town council and your sheriff and your district attorney. And these are the important elections that we talk about so often on this show.
Right, the prosecutors and district attorney who let the felons go back on the street in 24 to 72 hours, or give guys who rape 9-year-old girls 6 months in county jail.
So they may not be as newsworthy and glamorous as the presidential, but these elections are more as important as the presidential election.
They absolutely are.
So.
If you want to keep criminals off the street, pay attention who you vote for judge and district attorney.
There were 4 different judges I voted for tonight, by the way. It was everything from Superior Court to District Court to Court of Common Pleas, and I forget what the 4th one was I voted for tonight.
Well, good. And hopefully
But also the sheriff.
And the sheriff. You got a good sheriff?
Yeah, we do have a good sheriff in our town, yeah.
Well, good. All right. Anyway, we run out of time, so I want to thank everybody who listened for giving up 30 minutes of your busy day to listen to me ramble on about things I find of important. I'll try to get producer Susan to put some of the links up, like the Starlink map. It's an interactive graphic map on the website. If you want to, anyway, if you have any questions, or you want to make a show, you want to make a suggestion, or you have any questions, or you want to see some of the links, or you want me to send you an email with some of the show links, just send me an email to Joe at JerzeeJoe.com. And again, Jerzee is J-E-R as in Robert, Z as in zebra, double E, Jerzee, JerzeeJoe.com, or Joe at JerzeeJoe.com. And I will respond to each and every email. And if you want a link, I'll send it to you. With that, producer Susan, anything you'd like to add?
No, just New Jersey people, get out and vote in a couple of weeks.
All right, very good. Thanks for your time, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.